He sat in silence, dressed in plain clothes, carrying nothing that showed who he truly was. To most, he looked like an ordinary passenger. But on that flight, silence was not enough to protect him. A flight attendant looked at him with doubt, treated him with scorn, and questioned if he even belonged in his seat. Passengers watched, some recording, others whispering. They didn't know the truth. The man they judged so quickly carried a power far greater than anyone on that plane could imagine. Who was he, and how would this flight change everything? Ibrahim Traoré was not dressed like a man of power that day. No grand uniform, no flashing cameras, no entourage. Just a quiet man in plain clothes carrying a small bag, moving through the airport like any other traveler. To those who glanced, his way, he seemed ordinary, someone who blended into the crowd, unnoticed and unimportant. But beneath that simple appearance was the leader of a nation, the president of Burkina Faso. He had chosen to fly without attention, without ceremony, to feel what ordinary people felt when they traveled. And as he walked toward his gate, he carried himself with the calm of a man who knew his worth, even if no one else did. But in places where appearances matter more than truth, calmness can be mistaken for weakness. Some watched him with suspicion. Others whispered quietly, questioning what a man like him was doing in the first-class lounge. Still, he waited patiently, his ticket in hand, never showing a trace of anger or pride. The plane that afternoon was full, passengers rushing to board, attendants moving quickly, voices mixing with the sound of rolling suitcases. Most travelers were simply tired, eager to sit and fly. But for Ibrahim, this flight would not be a simple journey. Something waited for him beyond the boarding gate. Something that would test his patience, his dignity, and his strength in ways he had faced many times before. And soon, inside that airplane cabin, a moment of quiet disrespect would spark a storm, one that no passenger on board would ever forget. The line to board was long, a shuffle of footsteps, the steady beeping of tickets scanning. Ibrahim stood quietly among the crowd, his ticket folded neatly in his hand. When his turn came, he stepped forward with calm eyes. The attendant at the gate glanced at his clothes, then at his ticket. Her smile faded. "This line is for first class," she said, her arm blocking his way. Passengers behind him stopped, curious. Ibrahim handed her the ticket again without a word. She scanned it. A soft beep confirmed its validity. Still, her eyes narrowed. "Seat 2A? That can't be right." Whispers rose. Some passengers frowned, others pulled out their phones. The doubt in her voice was loud enough for all to hear. Ibrahim simply nodded, waiting. The gate attendant hesitated, then reluctantly let him pass, but her glare followed him onto the jet bridge. Inside the plane, the tension only grew. He placed his small bag in the overhead bin and sat by the window. Seat 2A was his. Yet, from the moment he sat down, the flight attendant assigned to first class made sure he felt unwelcome. When others were greeted with smiles, his presence was met with coldness. She skipped him when offering hot towels, dropped a bottle of water on his tray without a word, and leaned too close when fastening another passenger's seatbelt, her voice sharp but directed at him. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Passengers noticed. A woman beside him frowned. A businessman across the aisle shook his head. Some filmed quietly on their phones, capturing the silent battle unfolding. But the attendant didn't stop. As meals were served, she slammed his tray down harder than necessary, muttering under her breath. She moved through the cabin as if he were invisible, except when she wanted to remind him that he didn't belong. Ibrahim, however, never raised his voice. His calm only seemed to fuel her frustration. At one point, she turned to a colleague and whispered, loud enough for Ibrahim and others to hear, "He must have stolen someone's card. Men like him don't pay for first class." The words cut through the air like glass. The woman in seat 2B gasped. The businessman shifted uncomfortably. cameras tilted higher. Still, Ibrahim said nothing. His silence carried more weight than anger could, but the more composed he stayed, the bolder she became. The plane shook suddenly, turbulence rattling trays and glasses. Passengers gripped armrests. The attendant walked briskly through the cabin, checking belts. When she reached Ibrahim's, "Row," she leaned in with a smirk. "Better hold on tight. Wouldn't want you flying out of a seat that isn't yours." Her voice dripped with contempt. Passengers stared in disbelief. Ibrahim looked up, his expression calm, his hands steady. He adjusted his belt, then turned back to the window. The cabin grew colder, not from the air but from the weight of her disdain. Every small act of disrespect, every glance filled with prejudice, built toward something no one could ignore. Even those who had remained silent began to shift uneasily in their seats, wondering how far this would go. And as the plane climbed higher above the clouds, so did the tension. It was no longer just about a seat. It was about dignity, about humanity, about how much one man could endure in silence. But silence does not last forever. The flight had been tense from the start, but now it reached a breaking point. Lunch trays clattered as the attendant leaned over Ibrahim's seat, her voice sharper than ever. "This cabin is not for you. People like you should know their place." The words, venomous and loud enough for all to hear, cut through the quiet, like a blade. Gasps spread across the rows. The woman beside him covered her mouth, her hands trembling. A businessman in the aisle shook his head, muttering in disbelief. Phones were raised higher, lenses capturing every second. But Ibrahim remained still, his gaze steady, his silence louder than her insults. The attendant wasn't finished. She dropped his cutlery onto the tray with a clang, then leaned close, her whisper laced with poison. "You don't belong here. You stink up this cabin just by sitting in it." Passengers froze. A heavy silence fell. The cruelty in her words was undeniable. It wasn't about a ticket anymore. It wasn't about class. It was about stripping a man of his dignity, turning him into something less than human. And yet Ibrahim did not flinch. He didn't shout, didn't demand respect. Instead, he sat taller, his calm presence a quiet defiance against the storm. That calm unsettled her more than anger ever could. Finally, one passenger snapped. The businessman stood, his voice trembling but firm. "Enough. We all see what you're doing. This man has done nothing wrong, and you treat him like he doesn't exist. Shame on you." Others murmured in agreement, some clapping softly, others demanding the abuse stop. The attendant's face turned red, her authority crumbling before dozens of eyes and cameras. She stammered, searching for control she no longer had. But control was gone. And in that moment, as the plane began its slow descent, the truth that had been hidden all along was about to be revealed. The wheels touched the runway, and the cabin stirred with relief. But in first class, no one was thinking about luggage or connecting flights. All eyes were on Ibrahim. As the seatbelt sign went off, airport staff appeared outside, rolling a carpet across the tarmac. Soldiers stood waiting beside a black car, with flags fluttering on its hood. Passengers leaned to the windows, whispering, confused. Then Ibrahim stood. He lifted his small bag from the overhead bin, moving with quiet dignity. Phones filmed as realization spread. This man, the one mocked and dismissed, was not just another traveler. He was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. The flight attendant froze. Her face drained of color as the truth crashed over her. She had not only humiliated a man, she had humiliated herself before the world. Stumbling, she whispered an apology, but Ibrahim's calm eyes met hers with a steady question unspoken. "Would you have treated me differently if you had known who I was?" He stepped off the plane without anger, without gloating. The soldiers saluted. Cameras flashed, and the passengers sat stunned, left with a lesson heavier than their carry-ons. Respect, they realized, should never depend on status, wealth, or skin color. This was more than an insult to one man. It was a mirror, reflecting how quickly prejudice can strip dignity from those who deserve it most. How often do we judge someone? By their appearance. How often do we measure worth by what we see, rather than who they are? Racism doesn't always roar. It whispers in small humiliations, in cold glances, in words that wound deeper than fists. And it thrives until silence refuses to feed it. So, the next time you see someone treated as less, will you look away or will you speak? This story is not just about one man on one flight. It's about how prejudice shows itself in everyday life and how silence allows it to grow. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it with others. Start conversations. And speak out when you see someone treated unfairly. Your voice matters more than you know. Every time we choose respect over hate, we shift the world a little closer to justice. So, before you leave, press like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because change begins when we refuse to stay quiet.